I found it tucked beneath a stack of hotel towels while packing for our flight home from Santorini. A burgundy passport I'd never seen before, bearing my husband's photo but a name I didn't recognize. Derek Michael Castellano. Not Derek Walsh, the man I'd been married to for 8 years. The passport fell open to reveal stamps from places he'd claimed never to have visited: Dubai, Bangkok, Zurich. All within the last 6 months, all during his supposed business trips to Portland and Seattle. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My hands trembled as I photographed each page with my phone, the Mediterranean sunset streaming through our villa's windows, casting long shadows across evidence of a life I knew nothing about. Derek was downstairs, settling our bill, probably charming the concierge with stories about his logistics business, the same stories that had funded this luxury anniversary trip. 8 years of marriage, and I was holding proof that the man I shared a bed with was a complete stranger. The passport felt heavier than it should have as I slipped it back exactly where I'd found it, beneath the Egyptian cotton towels Derek had insisted on purchasing from the hotel boutique. My mind raced through every business trip, every late-night phone call he'd taken in another room, every time he'd returned from travel with gifts that seemed too expensive for his declared income. I'd been a forensic accountant for 12 years, trained to spot financial inconsistencies and hidden assets, yet I'd never thought to investigate my own husband. Derek had swept into my life during my final semester at Portland State University, where I was completing my master's in accounting. He'd been older, confident, driving a BMW and wearing suits that cost more than my monthly rent. While my classmates struggled with student loans and entry-level job hunts, Derek offered stability, adventure, and a lifestyle I had only seen in movies. He claimed to run international logistics for various companies, moving goods across borders, facilitating trade agreements. The work required extensive travel, he'd explained, but it paid exceptionally well. Our courtship had been a whirlwind of expensive restaurants, weekend trips to wine country, and promises of a future where I'd never have to worry about money again. He'd proposed on a yacht in San Francisco Bay, the ring so stunning that strangers stopped us on the street to admire it. By our wedding day, I'd already begun to notice the inconsistencies, but love has a way of making you explain away the unexplainable. His business contacts never attended our wedding. His family was notably absent, with vague explanations about overseas obligations. Even his best man, Thomas Burke, seemed more like a business associate than a lifelong friend. After our honeymoon in the Maldives, Derek had been clear about our domestic arrangements. He handled all finances, claiming it was more efficient given his international dealings and complex tax situations. I focused on building my career at Morrison & Associates, a mid-sized accounting firm specializing in corporate fraud investigation. The irony wasn't lost on me now. By day, I uncovered financial deceptions for clients. By night, I went home to a man whose entire existence might have been fabricated. The first few years of marriage passed in a comfortable routine. Derek traveled frequently, sometimes for days, occasionally for weeks. He always returned with stories of delayed flights, difficult clients, and the challenges of moving cargo through international customs. His trips seemed to cluster around certain times of year, which he explained as seasonal fluctuations in global trade. I'd accepted these explanations because they came from someone I trusted, someone who held me during thunderstorms and remembered my coffee order without being asked. My work at Morrison & Associates had taught me that financial deception usually starts small and grows exponentially. Corporate embezzlers rarely begin by stealing millions. They start with a few $100s, then gradually increase their theft as they become more confident and desperate. Personal deception, I was learning, followed similar patterns. Derek's lies had likely started small, perhaps with minor exaggerations about his work or income. Over time, those lies had required more lies to sustain them, until he'd constructed an entirely false identity. The passport I'd discovered wasn't just evidence of travel to undisclosed locations. It was proof of a parallel existence, complete with false documentation that would have required significant resources to obtain. Derek Michael Castellano had entry and exit stamps spanning 3 years, covering periods when Derek Walsh had supposedly been in domestic meetings or recovering from business trip fatigue. The timing was too precise to be coincidental. While I'd believed he was exhausted from West Coast travel, Derek Michael Castellano had been jet-setting across continents. I tried to recall conversations about his work, searching for clues I might have missed or dismissed. Derek had always been vague about specifics, claiming client confidentiality prevented detailed discussions. When pressed, he'd change the subject, or deflect with romantic gestures. Our anniversary dinner reservation tonight, he'd mentioned yesterday, was at a restaurant favored by international business travelers. He'd made similar comments throughout our marriage, casual references that now seemed like breadcrumbs, leading to a truth I'd been too trusting to follow. The villa's landline rang, startling me from my racing thoughts. Derek's voice carried up from the terrace, warm and familiar, speaking to what sounded like a hotel guest. This was the man who'd held my hair while I suffered food poisoning in Morocco 2 years ago, who'd driven 4 hours through a snowstorm to reach me when my father had his heart attack, who'd cried genuine tears of joy when I'd gotten my promotion to senior associate. Yet here I sat, holding evidence that he'd been living a double life with the skill of a professional operative. My phone buzzed with a text from my best friend Nicole Patterson, who was house-sitting our Portland home while we were away. The contractors finished the basement renovation early. Found some interesting things behind the old drywall. Call me when you can. The message included a photo that made my blood freeze. A metal filing cabinet, clearly hidden for years, with several manila folders visible in the top drawer. Even through the grainy phone image, I could make out what looked like financial documents and additional passport photos. I walked to the villa's window, watching Derek below as he chatted with an elderly German couple about their travel plans. His posture was relaxed, his smile genuine, his manner that of a successful businessman sharing vacation stories with fellow travelers. Nothing in his demeanor suggested anxiety or concern. If he was living a double life, he'd become remarkably comfortable with the deception. The thought sent chills through me. How could someone maintain such elaborate lies while seeming completely at ease? The German couple moved away, and Derek glanced up at our window. When he saw me watching, his face lit up with the smile that had first captured my heart 8 years ago. He blew me a kiss, pointed at his watch, and mouthed that he'd be up soon. The gesture was so natural, so filled with apparent affection, that for a moment I questioned my own discovery. Maybe there was an innocent explanation. Maybe Derek Michael Castellano was a business alias, legal and necessary for his international work. Maybe I was overreacting to something that had a simple, reasonable explanation. But my training in forensic accounting had taught me to trust documentation over explanations, evidence over emotions. The passport in my hands represented facts, not feelings. Derek had traveled to Dubai, Bangkok, and Zurich under an assumed identity, during times when he'd claimed to be elsewhere. These weren't casual tourist visits. The dates spanned months, suggesting ongoing business or relationships in each location. The stamps were authentic, showing proper entry and exit procedures. This wasn't a fake document or a misunderstanding. This was systematic deception on an international scale. I heard Derek's footsteps on the villa's stairs, his familiar whistle echoing through the hallway. In 30 seconds, he'd walk through our bedroom door with that same warm smile, probably carrying Greek coffee and pastries from the hotel restaurant, ready to discuss our flight details and plans for our final evening in Santorini. He'd kiss my forehead, ask if I'd finished packing, and maintain the loving husband persona that had convinced me for 8 years that I was married to a successful but straightforward businessman. Instead, I was married to Derek Michael Castellano, a man whose international activities were significant enough to require false documentation and whose destinations suggested business dealings far removed from legitimate logistics. Dubai was a global hub for money laundering and human trafficking. Bangkok was notorious for its role in international crime networks. Zurich's banking sector, while legitimate, also provided services for those seeking to hide assets from law enforcement agencies. The door handle turned, and Derek stepped into our room carrying a tray of Greek coffee and honey pastries, exactly as I'd predicted. His face glowed with contentment, probably anticipating our evening dinner and intimate conclusion to our anniversary celebration. He had no idea that his carefully constructed world was about to collapse, that his loving wife had just discovered evidence that would change everything between us forever. "Hello, beautiful," he said, setting the tray on our bedside table and moving toward me for his customary embrace. I forced myself to accept his kiss, to smile, and comment on the coffee's aroma, to maintain the facade of normalcy while my mind raced with implications and possibilities. If Derek could maintain such perfect deception, then I could certainly manage a few hours of pretense, while I figured out how to respond to my discovery. The passport felt like it was burning a hole through the towels beneath which I'd hidden it, but Derek showed no concern about his belongings. He was already discussing our dinner reservations, asking about my preference for wine pairings, behaving like a man without secrets. Either he was a masterful actor, or he'd compartmentalized his two lives so completely that Derek Walsh genuinely existed independently from Michael Castellano. As we sat on the terrace sipping coffee and watching the Aegean Sea, I studied my husband's face for signs I'd missed over 8 years of marriage.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
Were there moments of anxiety when unexpected phone calls arrived? Did his stories about business trips contain more inconsistencies than I'd noticed? Had there been times when his explanations felt rehearsed, or his affection seemed calculated? The truth was, Derek had been a wonderful husband by most measures. He was attentive, generous, supportive of my career, and genuinely interested in my thoughts and feelings. Our intimate life was fulfilling, our conversations engaging, our shared experiences filled with laughter and mutual respect. If he was deceiving me about his professional life, he was simultaneously building a genuine personal relationship. The contradiction was almost harder to accept than outright betrayal would have been. My phone buzzed again with another message from Nicole. The filing cabinet has financial records going back years. Different names, offshore accounts. You need to see this immediately. This isn't just about hidden assets, call me now. The urgency in her text confirmed that my discovery was part of something much larger than a second passport or false identity. Derek's deception was systematic, documented, and apparently ongoing for years. I excused myself to use the bathroom, claiming the Greek coffee was stronger than expected. Once alone, I called Nicole on a secure app we'd installed for sharing sensitive client information during our respective work projects. She answered immediately, her voice tense with concern. "Catherine, where are you right now? Are you alone? Can Derek hear this conversation?" The question sent my anxiety soaring. Nicole was naturally cautious, but this level of concern suggested she'd discovered something genuinely dangerous. "I'm in our villa bathroom," I whispered. "Derek's on the terrace. What did you find that couldn't wait until we got home?" Nicole's response changed everything I thought I knew about my husband and my marriage. The filing cabinet contains financial records for at least 6 different identities, all with Derek's photo. Bank statements from places like the Cayman Islands, Switzerland, and Singapore. But Catherine, some of these documents reference human trafficking operations. There are manifests, shipping routes, and payment records that look like they're connected to moving people, not goods. The phone nearly slipped from my hands as Nicole's words sank in. Derek wasn't just maintaining a false identity or hiding assets. He was potentially involved in human trafficking, one of the most serious international crimes. The logistics business he'd claimed to run might actually involve moving human beings across borders illegally. The expensive gifts, luxury trips, and comfortable lifestyle I'd enjoyed were potentially funded by the exploitation of vulnerable people. Nicole continued speaking, but her words became distant as the full implications crashed over me. If Derek was involved in human trafficking, then I was potentially an unwitting accomplice, benefiting from criminal proceeds, living in a home purchased with blood money. My forensic accounting background meant I understood the legal implications. Even unknowing spouses could face charges for financial crimes if they'd benefited from illegal proceeds. My career, my freedom, my entire future could be at stake. "I need you to photograph everything," I told Nicole, fighting to keep my voice steady. "Every document, every page, every file. Upload them to our secure server immediately. Don't touch the physical documents more than necessary, and wear gloves if you have any." This is potential evidence in a federal investigation. Nicole's sharp intake of breath confirmed she understood the gravity of the situation. After 12 years of investigating corporate fraud, I'd never imagined I'd need to apply those skills to my own marriage. "Are you safe there?" Nicole asked. "Should you leave immediately?" Her concern was valid. If Derek suspected I'd discovered his secret identity, there was no way to predict his response. Someone capable of maintaining such elaborate deception might also be capable of violence, if threatened with exposure. But leaving abruptly would certainly raise his suspicions, and I needed time to gather more evidence and plan my next steps carefully. I have to maintain normalcy until our flight tomorrow, I decided. If he realizes I know anything, he might disappear completely. But Nicole, I need you to contact Agent Maria Santos at the FBI's Portland office. Tell her we have evidence of potential international trafficking operations and that an American citizen may be involved. Give her my name and Derek's, both versions. Tell her I'm a forensic accountant and I'll cooperate fully with any investigation. After ending the call, I stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. The woman looking back at me appeared calm and composed, but inside I felt like my entire world was disintegrating. 8 years of marriage, and I'd been living with a stranger. Worse, I'd been unknowingly benefiting from crimes that destroyed other people's lives. The engagement ring on my finger, the clothes in my closet, the vacation we were currently enjoying, all potentially purchased with money earned by exploiting vulnerable human beings. I returned to the terrace where Derek was reading a travel magazine, looking peaceful and content. When he saw me, he reached for my hand and kissed it gently. "I love you, Catherine," he said with what seemed like complete sincerity. "These 8 years with you have been the happiest of my life." The words that should have warmed my heart instead filled me with revulsion. If Derek was involved in human trafficking, then his capacity for compartmentalization was truly frightening. As we prepared for our final dinner in Santorini, I watched Derek choose his clothes with the same care he always took with his appearance. His movements were confident, his manner relaxed. There was no indication that he suspected anything had changed between us. He was either innocent of the crimes suggested by the evidence Nicole had found, or he was one of the most skilled manipulators I'd ever encountered. Either way, our marriage as I'd known it was over. Even if Derek had legitimate explanations for everything Nicole had discovered, the fact that he'd maintained a secret identity for years meant our relationship had been built on fundamental deception. Trust, once shattered, couldn't be rebuilt with explanations or apologies. Tomorrow's flight home to Portland would be the beginning of the end, but tonight I had to play the role of loving wife one last time, while gathering whatever additional evidence I could find and preparing for a confrontation that would determine both of our futures. The flight from Santorini to Portland stretched endlessly before me, 13 hours of forced proximity with a man whose very existence had become a question mark. Derek slept peacefully in the seat beside me, his head tilted against the window, completely unaware that his wife was systematically documenting every inconsistency in 8 years of shared memories. While he dreamed, I filled 3 notebook pages with dates, locations, and financial discrepancies that my trained eye was now recognizing with devastating clarity. The airline's Wi-Fi connection allowed me to access the secure server where Nicole had uploaded photographs from the hidden filing cabinet. Each image revealed another layer of Derek's manufactured identity. Bank statements for Derek Michael Castellano showed deposits ranging from $50,000 to $200,000, arriving with monthly regularity from companies with names like Mediterranean Shipping Solutions and Aegean Transport Logistics. The amounts dwarfed Derek Walsh's declared income, which I had helped him file on our joint tax returns for years. A manifest dated 3 months ago listed cargo from Bangkok to Dubai, but the item descriptions were deliberately vague. Personal effects, household goods, agricultural supplies. My experience investigating corporate fraud had taught me that legitimate shipping companies provided specific item codes, weights, and detailed descriptions for customs purposes. These manifests read like carefully constructed lies, designed to pass casual inspection while concealing their actual contents. The most disturbing document was a payment ledger with entries in multiple currencies. Transactions were coded with letters and numbers that meant nothing to me, but the amounts were staggering. Individual entries ranged from 10,000 to 100,000 euros, with notation marks that could have represented successful deliveries or completed transactions. If these represented payments for moving human beings, the scale of Derek's operation was far larger than I'd initially feared. Nicole had also photographed correspondence between Derek and associates whose names appeared repeatedly across multiple documents. Thomas Burke, the man who'd served as Derek's best man at our wedding, was apparently more than a casual friend. Their email exchanges discussed routes, timing, and what they termed package deliveries, with the efficiency of seasoned professionals. Vincent Clark appeared to handle financial arrangements, coordinating payments, and managing accounts across multiple countries. Most chilling was a message dated just 2 weeks ago, while Derek had been on a supposed business trip to Seattle. Thomas had written, "Bangkok pipeline running smoothly. 15 packages delivered to Dubai contacts without complications. Payment confirmed through Zurich channels. Catherine's situation remains stable?" Derek's response had been brief. "C, completely unaware. Home situation provides perfect cover. No concerns." I was apparently the perfect cover. The forensic accountant wife, who helped her husband file taxes, who believed in his international logistics business, who provided him with domestic stability while he orchestrated human trafficking operations across 3 continents. The realization hit me like physical pain. Derek hadn't married me despite my professional background. He'd married me because of it. Who better to provide legitimacy than someone trained to spot financial crimes, who would presumably raise questions if anything seemed suspicious? Except I hadn't raised questions. I'd been so grateful for Derek's love and financial stability that I'd actively avoided looking too closely at inconsistencies. When expensive gifts appeared without clear explanations, I'd assumed he was simply generous. When his travel schedules seemed to follow patterns I couldn't understand, I'd trusted his explanations about seasonal trade fluctuations. When his business contacts never became personal friends, I'd attributed it to professional discretion. My phone vibrated with an encrypted message from Agent Maria Santos, who had apparently received Nicole's report and was now coordinating with Interpol's Human Trafficking Task Force. "Ms. Walsh, I need to speak with you immediately upon your return to Portland. Do not confront your husband or alter your normal routine. We have been monitoring activities related to the identities you've uncovered, and your cooperation could be crucial to an ongoing international investigation. Please confirm your arrival details and maintain this communication channel." The message confirmed my worst fears while providing the first glimpse of hope I'd felt since discovering the passport. Law enforcement was already aware of Derek's activities, which meant I wasn't facing this nightmare alone. But it also meant that Derek was likely under surveillance, which raised questions about how much danger I might be in if he suspected my knowledge. I studied Derek's sleeping face, searching for clues about the man I'd shared a bed with for 8 years. His features were relaxed, peaceful even. There was no indication of the stress that should accompany someone living such a complex double life. Either Derek had developed superhuman compartmentalization skills, or he'd become so comfortable with deception that maintaining multiple identities required no conscious effort. The flight attendant offered me another coffee, and I accepted gratefully, needing the caffeine to maintain focus during the most important performance of my life. For the remaining hours of our journey, and however long the investigation required, I had to continue playing the role of loving, unsuspecting wife while gathering intelligence for law enforcement agencies. Derek stirred beside me, blinking awake with the confused expression of someone emerging from deep sleep. He smiled when he saw me watching him, reaching over to squeeze my hand with familiar affection. "How long was I asleep?" he asked, checking his watch and stretching in the confined airline seat. I told him he'd been unconscious for nearly 4 hours, which he attributed to the relaxation of our anniversary celebration and the satisfaction of a successful vacation. As he spoke about our time in Santorini, recounting favorite memories and expressing gratitude for the experience we'd shared, I realized Derek's feelings for me were probably genuine within the context of his compartmentalized existence. Derek Walsh, the loving husband, truly appreciated our marriage and the stability I provided. Derek Michael Castellano, the international criminal, simply operated in a completely separate mental space that didn't interfere with his domestic emotions. The psychological complexity was almost more disturbing than straightforward betrayal would have been. If Derek had been consistently deceptive or emotionally manipulative, I could have categorized him as a simple sociopath and moved forward with clear moral boundaries. Instead, I was married to someone capable of genuine love and horrific crimes simultaneously. Someone who could hold me tenderly while orchestrating human trafficking operations with clinical efficiency. Our plane began its descent into Portland, and Derek became more animated, discussing our plans for the coming week and his upcoming business trips. He mentioned needing to travel to Los Angeles and San Francisco for meetings with new clients, dates that I mentally cross-referenced with the passport stamps I'd photographed. Derek Michael Castellano had no stamps for domestic U.S. travel, which meant these trips were either legitimate business for Derek Walsh or carefully constructed alibis for international activities under his false identity. Portland International Airport appeared below us, familiar and welcoming after our Mediterranean adventure. In a few hours, I would be sitting in my own living room, surrounded by evidence of Derek's criminal activities, coordinating with federal agents to build a case against the man who'd promised to love and protect me forever. The surreal nature of the situation hadn't diminished during our flight. If anything, the impending confrontation with reality made our current normalcy seem even more bizarre. Derek helped retrieve our luggage with his usual considerate efficiency, making small talk with fellow passengers and commenting on Portland's weather compared to Santorini's perpetual sunshine. His behavior remained completely consistent with the man I'd known for 8 years, showing no signs of stress or concern about anything we might find at home. Either he had absolute confidence in his ability to maintain his secret life, or he genuinely didn't know that Nicole had discovered the hidden filing cabinet. The drive home took 30 minutes through familiar Portland neighborhoods that now seemed foreign and threatening. Every street corner could conceal surveillance teams. Every casual passerby might be an undercover agent. My forensic accounting work had occasionally intersected with law enforcement investigations, but I'd never been personally involved in an active case, especially not one involving international crime and my own marriage. Our house appeared unchanged from the outside, the same charming craftsman-style home in the Pearl District that we'd purchased 3 years ago. Derek had insisted on this neighborhood, claiming he appreciated its proximity to the International Business District and easy airport access. Now I understood that the location had been strategically chosen to facilitate his criminal activities, rather than for its aesthetic appeal or investment potential. Nicole's car was gone from our driveway, replaced by an unfamiliar sedan that could have belonged to anyone but probably represented law enforcement surveillance. Derek didn't seem to notice anything unusual as he carried our suitcases to the front door, chattering about checking mail and resuming normal routines after our week-long absence. Inside, our home looked exactly as we'd left it, with no obvious signs of Nicole's discovery or law enforcement activity. The basement renovation had been completed as scheduled, with fresh drywall and new flooring that showed no evidence of the hidden filing cabinet that had been concealed behind the previous walls. Derek examined the work with satisfaction, praising the contractors, efficiency, and discussing potential uses for the additional space. My phone buzzed with a text message that appeared to come from our neighbor but was clearly from Agent Santos. Everything photographed and secured. Team standing by for your signal. Maintain normal routine until contact tomorrow morning. Your safety is our priority. The message disappeared after 15 seconds, leaving no trace of its contents. Derek unpacked our suitcases while I sorted through accumulated mail, both of us performing the domestic rituals that concluded every trip we'd taken together. He found a package addressed to him from a company I didn't recognize, which he opened casually before setting aside without comment. The contents appeared to be routine business documents, but I now questioned every aspect of Derek's daily activities. As evening approached, Derek suggested ordering dinner from our favorite Thai restaurant, a tradition we'd maintained after every international trip. The normalcy of the suggestion, combined with his obvious contentment at being home, created cognitive dissonance that made my head spin. How could someone involved in international human trafficking maintain such genuine appreciation for simple domestic pleasures? While Derek called in our dinner order, I excused myself to use the upstairs bathroom, where I could communicate privately with Agent Santos. Her response to my encrypted message was immediate and concerning. We've identified your husband as a key figure in an international trafficking network that's been operating for over 5 years. His network has moved an estimated 300 people, primarily women and children from Southeast Asia to Middle Eastern destinations. We need your help to gather evidence that will hold up in international court. 300 people. The number hit me like a physical blow. Derek wasn't a small-time criminal or someone who'd made a few bad decisions. He was a major player in an industry that destroyed lives on an industrial scale. Every luxury we'd enjoyed, every vacation we'd taken, every expensive gift he'd given me had been purchased with money earned by exploiting vulnerable human beings. I returned downstairs to find Derek setting the table with his usual attention to detail, arranging our Thai food containers and pouring wine from a bottle we'd brought back from Greece. His movements were calm and practiced, showing no awareness that his wife had just learned the truth about his professional activities. The disconnect between his domestic contentment and the reality of his crimes was becoming increasingly surreal. During dinner, Derek talked enthusiastically about potential future travel destinations, mentioning places like Morocco, Turkey, and Eastern European cities that coincided with trafficking routes I'd read about during my corporate fraud investigations. His interest in these locations now seemed less like wanderlust and more like professional scouting, identifying new opportunities for expanding his criminal network. He also mentioned plans to meet with Thomas Burke and Vincent Clark later in the week, describing them as long-term business associates who were helping him develop new international partnerships. Given what I'd learned about their correspondence, these meetings would likely involve coordinating trafficking operations rather than legitimate business development. As we cleaned up after dinner, Derek's phone rang with a call from someone he identified only as Marcus. The conversation was brief and conducted mostly in vague terms, but Derek's tone became more serious and professional than his usual casual demeanor. When he hung up, he mentioned needing to make a quick trip to Seattle the following week, earlier than originally planned. I nodded and expressed understanding, playing the supportive wife role while mentally noting that Michael Castellano's passport showed no recent Seattle stamps. If Derek was claiming to travel domestically while actually leaving the country under his false identity, then his deception was becoming even more elaborate and systematic. That night, lying in bed beside someone I'd thought I knew completely, I stared at the ceiling, planning my next moves. Agent Santos had requested my cooperation in gathering additional evidence, which meant I would need to maintain my facade while systematically documenting Derek's activities. My forensic accounting background would be crucial in tracking his financial operations, but the personal cost of deceiving someone I'd loved for 8 years was already becoming overwhelming. Derek fell asleep quickly, his breathing deep and regular, apparently untroubled by any concerns about his secret life being discovered. His peaceful slumber, while lying next to someone he'd been deceiving for years, demonstrated a level of emotional compartmentalization that was genuinely frightening. If he could maintain such perfect separation between his criminal activities and personal relationships, there was no way to predict how he might respond if he discovered my knowledge. I spent most of the night alternating between horror at Derek's crimes and grief for the loss of my marriage. Even if law enforcement could build a case that would result in Derek's conviction, the man I'd loved had never really existed. Derek Walsh was a carefully constructed persona designed to provide cover for Michael Castellano's criminal activities. Everything I'd believed about our relationship had been manipulation, even if Derek's feelings within that manipulation had been genuine. By morning, I'd resolved to provide whatever assistance law enforcement required, regardless of personal cost. 300 people had suffered because of Derek's trafficking network. My broken heart and shattered marriage were insignificant compared to their suffering. If my cooperation could help stop his operations and potentially rescue future victims, then destroying my own life was an acceptable price. Agent Santos contacted me while Derek was in the shower, providing detailed instructions for our first official meeting. I would visit the FBI's Portland office under the pretext of consulting on an unrelated corporate fraud case, something Derek would find completely believable given my professional background. During that meeting, we would establish protocols for ongoing intelligence gathering and discuss the broader investigation into Derek's criminal network. As Derek prepared for his day, he seemed particularly energetic and focused, mentioning several important phone calls he needed to make and documents he needed to review. His increased activity level suggested that something significant was happening with his operations, which could provide valuable intelligence if I could gather details without arousing suspicion. He kissed me goodbye with his usual warmth, telling me he loved me and looked forward to our dinner plans that evening. The words that had once filled me with happiness now felt like daggers, reminders of how completely I'd been deceived by someone capable of expressing genuine affection while orchestrating horrific crimes. After Derek left for his supposed office, I spent an hour searching our home for additional evidence, using techniques I'd learned during corporate investigations. Hidden behind a false panel in Derek's home office, I found a second laptop that required password access I couldn't crack. Bank statements tucked inside book covers revealed additional accounts I'd never known about. A small safe behind a painting contained multiple sets of identification documents and significant amounts of cash in various currencies. Each discovery added another layer to Derek's deception, while providing evidence that could be crucial to law enforcement's investigation. By the time I left for my meeting with Agent Santos, I had documented enough criminal activity to ensure Derek's conviction on multiple charges, assuming investigators could connect him definitively to the trafficking operations suggested by his financial records. The FBI's Portland office was located in a nondescript downtown building that I'd passed countless times without realizing its significance. Agent Santos met me in a conference room equipped with recording equipment and secure communication systems, explaining that our conversation would be documented as part of an ongoing international investigation involving multiple law enforcement agencies. Agent Maria Santos was younger than I'd expected, probably in her early 40s, with the focused intensity of someone who'd spent years investigating serious crimes. She reviewed the evidence Nicole had photographed with the expertise of someone familiar with trafficking operations, immediately identifying patterns and connections that confirmed law enforcement's existing intelligence about Derek's network. "Your husband has been under surveillance for 8 months," she explained, "though we didn't have sufficient evidence to obtain search warrants or make arrests. The financial records and identity documents you've provided give us exactly what we need to move forward with charges and coordinate with our international partners to dismantle his network." She showed me photographs of Derek taken at various international airports, traveling under his Michael Castellano identity, and meeting with individuals identified as known trafficking coordinators. The images were professionally shot with telephoto lenses, showing Derek engaged in what appeared to be business meetings in locations ranging from Dubai hotel lobbies to Bangkok shipping facilities. The scope of law enforcement's existing knowledge was both reassuring and terrifying. They had been building a case against Derek for months, but they also had evidence of criminal activities far beyond what I'd discovered in our home. Derek wasn't just involved in trafficking operations. He was apparently a coordinator responsible for logistics across multiple international routes. Agent Santos explained that my cooperation would be essential for gathering real-time intelligence about Derek's upcoming activities and coordinating arrests that would prevent his escape once he realized law enforcement was closing in. The investigation involved agencies from 7 countries, with arrest warrants already prepared pending sufficient evidence to ensure successful prosecution. My role would be to maintain normal domestic routines while documenting Derek's communications, travel plans, and meetings with associates. The FBI would provide me with recording equipment and secure communication protocols, along with protective surveillance to ensure my safety throughout the operation. The meeting lasted 3 hours, covering every aspect of Derek's criminal activities and establishing detailed protocols for my ongoing cooperation. By the time I returned home, I had agreed to participate in an international law enforcement operation that would likely result in my husband's arrest and imprisonment, the dissolution of my marriage, and my testimony in criminal proceedings that could span multiple countries. Derek was already home when I arrived, working in his office with intense concentration that suggested important developments in his business operations. He greeted me warmly, asking about my day and sharing details about productive meetings with potential clients. His apparent happiness and enthusiasm for his work now carried sinister implications that made casual conversation feel like navigating a minefield. That evening, while Derek took phone calls in his office, I began implementing the surveillance protocols Agent Santos had taught me. Recording equipment concealed in common household items would capture his conversations, while software installed on our home computer would monitor his internet activities and email communications. Within hours, I was gathering intelligence that would help law enforcement agencies across multiple continents coordinate the largest trafficking bust in recent history, while the man I'd promised to love forever remained completely unaware that his carefully constructed double life was about to collapse around him. The recording device hidden in our kitchen caught Derek's first critical mistake at exactly 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. He thought I was still sleeping upstairs, but insomnia had driven me to the kitchen early, where I sat silently with coffee while he made what he believed was a private phone call. His voice carried the authoritative tone I'd never heard him use in personal conversations, discussing cargo schedules and delivery confirmations with clinical precision. "Bangkok pipeline experiencing delays," he said into his phone, pacing near the window while morning light filtered through our curtains. "Thomas needs to adjust Dubai timeline by 48 hours. Vincent has concerns about the Swiss accounts being monitored. Move everything through the Cayman route until further notice." The conversation lasted 12 minutes, during which Derek provided enough operational details to coordinate international arrests across 4 countries. Agent Santos had equipped me with recording devices so sophisticated that they captured every nuance of Derek's voice, along with background sounds that could help investigators identify his contacts through voice analysis. The kitchen device looked exactly like our standard salt shaker, while others were concealed inside picture frames, decorative objects, and even the coffee maker Derek used every morning. After Derek left for his supposed office, I transmitted the morning's intelligence to Agent Santos using encrypted protocols that made our communication invisible to anyone monitoring our internet connection. Her response came within minutes, confirming that Derek's conversation had provided real-time information about trafficking operations that were apparently experiencing disruption due to increased law enforcement pressure. The Swiss accounts Derek had mentioned were already under surveillance by international banking authorities, while his references to Bangkok and Dubai operations matched intelligence gathered by Interpol agents working undercover in both locations. My husband's casual morning phone call had inadvertently provided law enforcement with current information about criminal networks spanning multiple continents. That afternoon, Derek announced plans for an unexpected business trip to Los Angeles, claiming a client emergency required immediate attention. His sudden travel plans, combined with the morning's conversation about delayed operations and monitoring concerns, suggested that Derek's criminal network was experiencing significant pressure from law enforcement activities he wasn't fully aware of. I helped him pack for the trip with the same supportive efficiency I'd provided for 8 years, while secretly photographing documents he thought were safely concealed in his briefcase. Financial statements, contact lists, and travel itineraries that would provide investigators with detailed intelligence about his upcoming activities and associate meetings. The photographs revealed that Derek's Los Angeles trip was actually a cover for international travel under his Derek Michael Castellano identity. Airline confirmations showed flights to Mexico City, then connecting service to Bangkok, with return routing through Dubai and Zurich. The complex itinerary suggested meetings with multiple criminal contacts across several countries, possibly to address the operational disruptions he'd discussed during his morning phone call. Agent Santos reviewed the travel documents with particular interest, explaining that Derek's planned route would take him through countries where trafficking operations had recently experienced law enforcement intervention. His trip appeared timed to coordinate damage control efforts and possibly establish new operational procedures to avoid continued scrutiny. "We have teams positioned at each of his destinations," Agent Santos assured me during our secure communication. "Your husband's travel plans are providing us with unprecedented opportunities to observe his network's response to pressure and identify additional criminal associates we haven't previously connected to his operations." The FBI's coordination with international partners had reached remarkable sophistication, with surveillance teams prepared to document Derek's activities across multiple countries while maintaining the appearance of normal law enforcement routines. His criminal network had no idea that their communications were being intercepted, and their movements tracked by agencies from 7 different countries working in unprecedented cooperation. Derek's departure for Los Angeles provided an opportunity to conduct detailed searches of our home using professional forensic techniques. Agent Santos arrived with a technical team that could examine our house without leaving evidence of their presence, using equipment that detected hidden compartments, concealed electronics, and trace evidence that might reveal additional aspects of Derek's criminal activities. The search revealed far more than I discovered during my amateur investigations. Behind false walls and within modified appliances, Derek had concealed sophisticated communication equipment, additional financial records, and backup identification documents for multiple false identities. He wasn't just Derek Michael Castellano. He maintained operational identities in at least 6 different countries, each with supporting documentation that would have required significant resources and professional expertise to create. The technical team found evidence that our home's internet connection was being used for encrypted communications with criminal associates worldwide. Derek had installed hidden servers in our basement that were routing international communications through seemingly innocent domestic internet traffic. Our house was apparently serving as a communication hub for trafficking operations across multiple continents. Most disturbing was the discovery of detailed surveillance records that Derek had been maintaining about me. Hidden cameras in our bedroom, bathroom, and office had been recording my activities for months, while sophisticated monitoring software tracked my phone calls, internet usage, and even my work computer access at Morrison & Associates. Derek hadn't just been hiding his criminal life. He'd been systematically spying on mine. Agent Santos explained that Derek's surveillance of me was probably intended to ensure I remained unaware of his activities, while also providing him with advance warning if I became suspicious. The elaborate monitoring system demonstrated a level of paranoia and control that extended far beyond normal criminal precautions into genuine psychological manipulation. Your husband has been treating you like a potential security threat while maintaining the appearance of a loving marriage, she observed, reviewing footage Derek had secretly recorded of our most intimate moments. This level of systematic deception and violation requires someone with advanced training in psychological manipulation and operational security. The FBI's behavioral analysis suggested that Derek had likely received professional training in maintaining false identities and manipulating personal relationships. His ability to compartmentalize his criminal activities while expressing genuine affection for me indicated sophisticated psychological conditioning that went beyond typical criminal behavior into something approaching intelligence operative capabilities. While Derek was traveling internationally under his false identity, I maintained our normal domestic routines while secretly coordinating with law enforcement agencies to prepare for his eventual confrontation and arrest. The house felt different knowing about the hidden cameras and monitoring equipment, but Agent Santos's team had either removed or neutralized the surveillance systems without Derek's knowledge. Derek's phone calls from his supposed Los Angeles business trip provided additional intelligence about his criminal network's response to increasing law enforcement pressure. His conversations with Thomas Burke and Vincent Clark revealed growing concern about account freezes, travel restrictions, and associate arrests that were apparently happening faster than they'd anticipated. The Swiss situation is deteriorating rapidly, Derek told Thomas during a call I recorded using equipment Agent Santos had installed in our home phone system. Vincent's contacts are reporting unusual banking scrutiny across multiple jurisdictions. We may need to activate emergency protocols sooner than planned. Emergency protocols apparently involved liquidating assets, destroying evidence, and potentially eliminating witnesses who could provide testimony against the trafficking network. Derek's casual discussion of these measures demonstrated how thoroughly he'd embraced criminal thinking, viewing human beings as expendable resources rather than individuals with inherent value. Agent Santos confirmed that Derek's concerns were justified from his perspective. International law enforcement agencies were indeed coordinating unprecedented pressure against trafficking networks, using financial surveillance and communication interception to gather evidence for simultaneous arrests across multiple countries. Derek's operations were being systematically dismantled without his full awareness of the scope of law enforcement activity. On Derek's third day of travel, he called me with unusual urgency in his voice, claiming his Los Angeles meetings were extending longer than expected, and he might need to remain out of state for several additional days. His obvious anxiety contrasted sharply with his usual confident demeanor, suggesting that his criminal network was experiencing more serious disruption than he'd initially realized. "I love you, Catherine," he said at the end of our conversation, with an intensity that seemed genuine despite everything I now knew about his capacity for deception. "When I get home, we need to talk about some changes in my business arrangements. Nothing for you to worry about, just some adjustments that might affect my travel schedule." The comment about needing to discuss business changes suggested that Derek was preparing to alter his criminal operations significantly, possibly in response to law enforcement pressure he was beginning to recognize. His expression of love, while probably genuine within his compartmentalized emotional framework, now felt like manipulation designed to maintain my cooperation during a period when he might need increased domestic stability. Agent Santos interpreted Derek's call as confirmation that his criminal network was implementing contingency plans in response to mounting law enforcement pressure. His extended travel and vague references to business changes suggested he was coordinating with associates to establish new operational procedures, relocate assets, or possibly plan escape routes if their situation continued deteriorating. International arrest warrants have been prepared for your husband and his primary associates, Agent Santos informed me during our secure communication. We're coordinating with agencies in Bangkok, Dubai, Zurich, and Mexico City to arrest them simultaneously, preventing any member of the network from escaping or alerting others once law enforcement action begins. The scope of the coordinated operation was remarkable, involving hundreds of law enforcement officers across multiple countries working together to dismantle Derek's trafficking network completely. My cooperation had provided crucial intelligence that enabled this international coordination, but the personal cost was becoming overwhelming as the reality of Derek's crimes became increasingly clear. Evidence gathered during Derek's current trip confirmed that his network had trafficked over 400 people during the past 3 years, generating profits exceeding $15 million that had been laundered through banks in 12 different countries. The financial complexity of his operations rivaled major corporate criminal enterprises, while the human cost represented hundreds of destroyed lives. Derek returned from his supposed Los Angeles trip with obvious signs of stress that contrasted sharply with his usual post-travel demeanor. His confident manner had been replaced by nervous energy, while his affectionate behavior toward me seemed forced rather than natural. He was clearly struggling to maintain his Derek Walsh persona while managing whatever crisis his Michael Castellano identity was experiencing. That evening, Derek suggested we take a weekend trip to our cabin near Mount Hood, claiming he needed time away from business pressures to focus on our relationship. The suggestion was presented as romantic spontaneity, but I recognized it as potentially an attempt to remove me from our monitored home environment where his conversations could be recorded by law enforcement equipment. Agent Santos advised extreme caution regarding any travel with Derek, explaining that isolated locations could provide opportunities for him to eliminate potential witnesses if he suspected his criminal activities had been discovered. The FBI would maintain surveillance during any trip, but remote locations presented obvious risks that couldn't be completely mitigated. I agreed to the cabin trip while secretly coordinating with Agent Santos to ensure law enforcement teams would be positioned nearby without Derek's awareness. The weekend would provide opportunities to gather additional intelligence about his state of mind and potentially prompt conversations that might reveal his criminal network's current status and future plans. During our drive to the cabin, Derek's behavior alternated between forced cheerfulness and obvious anxiety. He asked seemingly casual questions about my work at Morrison & Associates, my recent communications with colleagues, and whether I'd noticed anything unusual about our home or neighborhood. His questions suggested growing paranoia about potential surveillance or investigation. The cabin had always been our retreat from daily pressures, a place where Derek seemed most relaxed and genuinely affectionate. But this weekend, his manner was tense and watchful, frequently checking his phone for messages and stepping outside to take calls he claimed were routine business communications, but which lasted far longer than normal. I used recording equipment Agent Santos had provided to capture Derek's phone conversations, which revealed that his criminal network was implementing emergency procedures in response to what they termed unusual law enforcement activity. Associates were reporting account freezes, travel restrictions, and communication disruptions that suggested coordinated international pressure against their operations. Vincent's entire Swiss operation has been compromised, Derek told someone during a call he thought was private. Thomas is reporting similar problems with the Bangkok pipeline. We may need to activate the nuclear option sooner than anticipated. The term nuclear option apparently referred to destroying evidence and eliminating witnesses, including potentially anyone who could connect the network members to their criminal activities. That night, lying in our cabin's bed while Derek slept fitfully beside me, I realized that his decision to bring me to this isolated location might represent more than romantic impulse or operational security. If Derek suspected I knew about his criminal activities, The cabin's remote location would provide opportunities to eliminate me without immediate discovery, then claim I'd died in an accident during our romantic weekend away. The thought sent terror through me, but also resolve. Hundreds of people had suffered because of Derek's trafficking network, while I'd unknowingly benefited from their exploitation for 8 years. If my cooperation with law enforcement could help bring Derek and his associates to justice, then whatever personal risk I faced was justified by the opportunity to prevent future victims. I spent the night implementing emergency communication protocols Agent Santos had taught me, using concealed equipment to transmit my location and status to FBI surveillance teams positioned in the surrounding area. If Derek attempted to harm me, law enforcement would be prepared to intervene immediately, though their ability to reach me quickly in such a remote location remained concerning. Derek woke early with obvious signs of insomnia and stress, immediately checking his phone for messages that seemed to increase rather than relieve his anxiety. His criminal network was clearly experiencing serious disruption, while his personal relationship with me was probably his only remaining source of stability and normalcy. Over breakfast, Derek began what seemed like a carefully rehearsed conversation about potential changes in our life circumstances. His business was experiencing unusual challenges, he explained, that might require significant adjustments to our financial arrangements and living situation. The vague explanations were obviously intended to prepare me for major disruptions without revealing their criminal origins. "Catherine," he said, taking my hands across our cabin's small dining table, "I need you to know that whatever happens in the coming weeks, my feelings for you have always been genuine. Our marriage has been the most important part of my life, even when business pressures made me seem distant or preoccupied." His apparent sincerity was perhaps the most disturbing aspect of our entire relationship. Derek's capacity to express genuine love while orchestrating horrific crimes demonstrated a level of psychological compartmentalization that was genuinely frightening. He could hold me tenderly while planning to eliminate witnesses, express romantic devotion while coordinating human trafficking operations. The conversation felt like a goodbye, as if Derek was preparing me for his permanent disappearance or potentially my own elimination if he decided I represented a security threat to his operations. His references to business challenges were obviously euphemisms for law enforcement pressure, while his expressions of love might be final words intended to provide him with psychological closure before taking irreversible action. Agent Santos had warned me that criminals facing imminent arrest sometimes became unpredictably violent, especially when their personal relationships might be compromised by their criminal exposure. Derek's isolated location choice and emotional intensity suggested he might be preparing for desperate action that could endanger both of us. That afternoon, Derek's phone rang with what was clearly an emergency call from one of his criminal associates. His side of the conversation confirmed that their trafficking network was experiencing systematic dismantling by coordinated international law enforcement action. Multiple arrests had apparently occurred overnight, while financial assets were being frozen across several countries. "It's happening faster than we anticipated," Derek said, his voice tight with controlled panic. "Vincent and Thomas are both unreachable. The Swiss and Bangkok operations have been completely compromised. We need to implement final protocols immediately." His criminal world was collapsing around him while he sat in our romantic cabin retreat, trying to maintain the appearance of a peaceful weekend with his unsuspecting wife. After the call ended, Derek's demeanor changed dramatically. His forced cheerfulness disappeared, replaced by cold calculation that I'd never seen before. He looked at me with the analytical expression of someone evaluating a potential threat, studying my face for signs that I might suspect the truth about his activities. The moment stretched between us like a chasm, filled with 8 years of shared memories and mutual deception. Derek was deciding whether I represented continued security or immediate danger, while I maintained the performance of loving ignorance that had become essential to my survival and the success of law enforcement's investigation. Whatever Derek decided in that moment would determine both of our fates, along with the hundreds of trafficking victims whose freedom depended on bringing his criminal network to justice. The cabin's peaceful isolation had become the setting for a confrontation that would expose years of systematic deception and determine whether justice would finally prevail over Derek's carefully constructed double life. Derek's phone exploded with notifications at 3:17 a.m., the constant buzzing pulling him from restless sleep into immediate alertness. He grabbed the device with desperate urgency, his face illuminated by the screen's glow as message after message confirmed his worst fears. I lay motionless beside him, feigning sleep while recording every word of his whispered phone conversations through equipment Agent Santos had concealed in my jewelry. Thomas Burke had been arrested at Bangkok International Airport while attempting to board a flight to Singapore. Vincent Clark was in custody in Zurich after Swiss banking authorities froze accounts containing over $8 million. Associate after associate was falling to coordinated international arrests that had begun precisely at midnight GMT, designed to prevent any member of the network from warning others before law enforcement could act simultaneously across multiple time zones. Derek's criminal empire was collapsing in real time while he sat in our isolated cabin, powerless to warn associates or implement escape plans. His careful coordination across multiple countries had become a liability, as law enforcement agencies used his own communication networks to track and arrest his criminal partners with devastating precision. "Catherine," Derek whispered, shaking my shoulder gently, "we need to leave immediately. There's been a family emergency. My sister in Seattle needs us right away." His lie was transparently desperate, delivered by someone whose entire world was disintegrating, and who was grasping for any excuse to flee without explaining the real reasons for his panic. I sat up slowly, affecting the confused disorientation of someone awakened from deep sleep, while secretly activating emergency protocols Agent Santos had taught me. A concealed panic button in my bracelet would alert FBI surveillance teams that Derek was attempting to move me to an unknown location, triggering immediate intervention if necessary. "What kind of emergency?" I asked, maintaining the concerned wife performance while evaluating Derek's mental state. His hands were shaking, sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cabin's cool temperature, and his eyes darted constantly toward windows as if expecting imminent danger. The composed criminal mastermind had been replaced by someone experiencing genuine terror. Derek's explanation was incoherent, mixing references to his fictional sister's supposed medical crisis with urgent claims about needing to check on business situations that couldn't wait until Monday. His story changed details between sentences, revealing someone whose psychological compartmentalization was breaking down under pressure he'd never experienced before. As Derek frantically packed our belongings, his phone continued delivering devastating news about his criminal network's destruction. Shipping facilities in Dubai had been raided by Interpol agents, while financial assets hidden across multiple countries were being systematically identified and frozen. The sophisticated operation he'd built over years was being dismantled in hours. "Banking authorities have identified every account," Derek muttered into his phone while throwing clothes into suitcases. "Communication networks are compromised. Safe houses are being monitored. We're completely exposed." His conversation confirmed that law enforcement agencies had achieved total penetration of his criminal network, using intelligence I'd helped provide to coordinate devastating simultaneous strikes. The drive from our cabin toward Portland began before dawn, with Derek checking mirrors obsessively and taking circuitous routes that suggested growing paranoia about surveillance. He claimed to be concerned about my fictional sister-in-law's condition, but his behavior indicated someone fleeing pursuing law enforcement rather than rushing to help family members. Agent Santos had prepared me for this possibility, explaining that criminals facing imminent arrest often became unpredictably dangerous, especially toward family members who might be perceived as witnesses or liability. Derek's isolation choice and erratic behavior suggested he was considering desperate measures that could endanger both of us. Halfway to Portland, Derek pulled into a rest stop and made a phone call that confirmed his criminal network had been completely compromised. His final associate, someone he'd never mentioned before, reported that multiple governments were coordinating arrest warrants, and that Derek's identity as Derek Michael Castellano was now known to international law enforcement agencies. "They know everything," Derek said, his voice hollow with defeat. "Financial records, travel documents, associate identities. Someone provided them with inside information that could only have come from network members or their immediate families." His statement sent chills through me as I realized Derek was beginning to suspect internal betrayal rather than external investigation. During the remaining drive to Portland, Derek's demeanor shifted from panic to cold calculation. He began asking seemingly casual questions about my recent activities, my conversations with colleagues, and whether I'd noticed anything unusual about our home or neighborhood. His interrogation suggested growing suspicion that I might be connected to his network's exposure. My forensic accounting background became crucial for maintaining credibility during Derek's questioning. I provided detailed explanations about recent client cases, colleague interactions, and routine activities that could account for any behavior he might have observed. My professional expertise in documentation and evidence analysis helped me construct believable explanations for any inconsistencies he might identify. When we arrived at our Portland home, Derek immediately began implementing what appeared to be predetermined emergency procedures. He retrieved hidden cash, additional identification documents, and communication equipment I'd never seen before. His movements were efficient and practiced, suggesting he'd prepared for the possibility of needing to disappear quickly. The FBI surveillance teams monitoring our house would be documenting Derek's evidence destruction and escape preparations, gathering additional proof of criminal activity while protecting me from potential violence. Agent Santos had assured me that intervention would occur immediately if Derek attempted to harm me or if his behavior suggested imminent flight. Derek's phone rang with what would prove to be his final communication from the criminal network he'd spent years building. The caller, speaking in coded language I'd learned to interpret through Agent Santos's training, confirmed that law enforcement agencies were coordinating arrest operations across 7 countries, and that Derek's capture was imminent, unless he could disappear completely within hours. "Catherine," Derek said after ending the call, his voice carrying terrifying calm, "we need to have an honest conversation about our future together. There are things about my business that I haven't shared with you, situations that might affect our lives in ways you can't imagine." His words suggested he was preparing to reveal his criminal activities, possibly to determine whether I could be trusted or eliminated. I maintained the performance of confused concern, while secretly documenting Derek's admissions through recording equipment that would provide prosecutors with direct evidence of his criminal activities. Every word he spoke was being transmitted to law enforcement agencies coordinating his imminent arrest. Derek began explaining his international logistics business with details he'd never shared during 8 years of marriage. He described complex shipping arrangements, financial transactions, and associate relationships that gradually revealed the scope of his trafficking operations. His confession was apparently intended to gauge my reaction and determine whether I could accept his criminal lifestyle or represented a threat requiring elimination. "The people I work with aren't conventional business partners," Derek continued, studying my face for signs of understanding or horror. "We move valuable cargo through channels that sometimes conflict with government regulations. The work is profitable, but requires absolute discretion from everyone involved, especially family members." His euphemistic description of human trafficking as moving valuable cargo demonstrated how completely Derek had dehumanized his victims, viewing vulnerable people as commercial products rather than human beings deserving protection. The psychological detachment necessary to coordinate such crimes while maintaining a loving marriage required compartmentalization that was genuinely frightening. As Derek revealed more details about his criminal network, I realized he was offering me a choice between becoming a willing accomplice or being eliminated as a security threat. His calm demeanor while discussing potential violence against law enforcement officers and network associates suggested someone who'd embraced criminal thinking completely. "The financial benefits have allowed us to live well," Derek observed, gesturing around our expensive home and referencing our luxury vacations. "But continuing that lifestyle requires understanding and cooperation from people I trust completely. I need to know that you can accept the realities of my business without compromising our operations." His statement confirmed that Derek viewed our marriage primarily as operational security, with my emotional value secondary to my utility as cover for his criminal activities. The man who'd claimed to love me was offering me partnership in human trafficking operations as proof of his trust and affection. My response had to balance maintaining Derek's confidence while avoiding any appearance of accepting his criminal offers. I expressed shock at his revelations while emphasizing my love for him and desire to support whatever decisions he felt were necessary for our future together. Derek's relief at my apparent acceptance was immediately overshadowed by his phone ringing with devastating news. Law enforcement agencies in Bangkok had rescued 43 trafficking victims from facilities his network had been operating, while similar raids in Dubai and Mexico City were yielding evidence that would support prosecution of everyone involved in the operations. The conversation lasted 12 minutes, during which Derek learned that his criminal network had been completely destroyed and that international arrest warrants had been issued for his immediate capture. His associates were either in custody or fleeing law enforcement, while financial assets had been frozen across multiple countries. After ending the call, Derek sat in silence for several minutes, apparently processing the complete destruction of his criminal empire and the implications for his personal survival. His calm demeanor was more frightening than panic would have been, suggesting someone capable of extreme violence when facing desperate circumstances. "Catherine," Derek said finally, "we have perhaps 6 hours before law enforcement agencies coordinate my arrest. I need you to understand that everything I've built, everything we've shared, is about to disappear permanently. The question is whether you disappear with me voluntarily or circumstances force other alternatives." His threat was delivered with the same calm tone he'd used to discuss dinner plans or vacation destinations, demonstrating how thoroughly criminal thinking had replaced normal emotional responses. The man I'd married was capable of murdering me to prevent testimony against his trafficking operations. Agent Santos had prepared me for this moment, explaining that Derek's final conversations would likely involve threats against my life combined with offers of escape that were actually planned eliminations. His criminal network's destruction would make me the primary witness against his operations, requiring my silence through death or disappearance. My bracelet's panic button was already activated, alerting FBI surveillance teams that Derek was threatening me with violence. Law enforcement officers were positioned around our house, ready to intervene immediately if Derek attempted to harm me or flee with me as a hostage. Derek retrieved a handgun from a concealed location in our bedroom, confirming that his emergency preparations included weapons for eliminating witnesses or law enforcement officers. His movements remained calm and methodical, suggesting someone who'd accepted the necessity of violence to protect his interests. The weapon changed everything between us, transforming Derek from loving husband into immediate threat requiring careful management until law enforcement could intervene. Every word I spoke and every movement I made could trigger violence that would end my life before agents could reach me. "I have 2 options," Derek explained, checking the weapon's ammunition with practiced efficiency. "We can disappear together to countries without extradition treaties, where we can rebuild our lives with resources I've prepared for emergencies. Or I can ensure you're never able to provide testimony that could destroy whatever future I might still have." His calm presentation of my murder as a reasonable alternative demonstrated complete psychological detachment from normal human emotions. The man holding me at gunpoint was someone I'd never really known, despite 8 years of marriage and thousands of shared experiences. Derek's phone buzzed with a final message that apparently confirmed law enforcement agencies were coordinating immediate arrest operations. His network associates were reporting surveillance activities and movement restrictions that suggested coordinated international action would begin within hours. "Time for decisions, Catherine," Derek said, the gun now pointed directly at me. "You can come with me willingly and share whatever future I can create, or you can stay here permanently and never threaten anyone again. Either way, this conversation ends now." The moment stretched between us like years, filled with the weight of choices that would determine whether justice prevailed or Derek escaped to continue destroying lives in new locations. Outside our house, FBI agents were positioning themselves for intervention that could save my life and ensure Derek faced consequences for his crimes. Derek's finger moved toward the weapon's trigger just as our front door exploded inward, admitting Agent Santos and a tactical team equipped for high-risk arrests. The coordinated breach happened with perfect timing, disarming Derek before he could shoot me or himself to avoid capture. The arrest was swift and professional, with Derek's weapon secured and his movements controlled before he could implement any final desperate measures. His calm demeanor disappeared immediately, replaced by rage and disbelief, as he realized that his carefully planned escape had been anticipated and prevented by law enforcement agencies. "How did you know?" Derek demanded as agents secured him with restraints designed for dangerous criminals. His question was directed at me rather than the arresting officers, confirming his suspicion that I'd been cooperating with law enforcement to document his criminal activities. Agent Santos provided the answer Derek was seeking, explaining that his criminal network had been under surveillance for months and that international cooperation had enabled coordinated arrests across multiple countries. His trafficking operations had been completely dismantled, with hundreds of victims rescued and millions of dollars in criminal assets recovered. As Derek was led away in federal custody, he looked back at me with an expression combining betrayal, rage, and something that might have been genuine hurt. The man who'd held a gun on me minutes earlier was mourning the loss of our relationship, apparently unable to understand that his criminal activities had made our marriage's destruction inevitable. Agent Santos confirmed that Derek's associates had been arrested simultaneously across 4 countries, preventing any member of the network from escaping or destroying evidence. The coordinated operation had recovered over 400 trafficking victims, while securing evidence that would ensure successful prosecution of everyone involved. The house fell silent after Derek's arrest, leaving me alone with the aftermath of 8 years of unknowing complicity in horrific crimes. Every room contained memories of shared experiences that had been built on exploitation of vulnerable people, while every possession had been purchased with money earned through human suffering. Nicole arrived within hours of Derek's arrest, providing emotional support while federal agents continued documenting evidence throughout our home. She'd maintained our friendship through months of deception and investigation, helping coordinate the evidence gathering that had made Derek's arrest possible. The media attention began immediately, with reporters describing the international trafficking network's destruction and Derek's arrest as the culmination of unprecedented law enforcement cooperation. My role in gathering intelligence was initially kept confidential, but Derek's criminal associates would eventually learn that his wife had provided crucial evidence for their prosecution. Within 24 hours of Derek's arrest, law enforcement agencies across multiple countries announced the rescue of over 400 trafficking victims and the recovery of more than $20 million in criminal assets. Derek's network had been completely destroyed, with every associate either arrested or under international warrant for their immediate capture. The psychological impact of learning that my marriage had been built on systematic deception and criminal exploitation would require years of therapy and support to process completely. But the knowledge that my cooperation had helped rescue hundreds of victims and prevent future trafficking provided some meaning to the destruction of everything I'd believed about my life. Derek's trial would eventually result in convictions on dozens of charges related to human trafficking, money laundering, and conspiracy across multiple international jurisdictions. His sentence of life imprisonment without possibility of parole meant he would never again be able to destroy lives through criminal exploitation. The aftermath of Derek's arrest marked the beginning of rebuilding my life, with full knowledge of how thoroughly I'd been deceived and manipulated by someone capable of expressing genuine love while orchestrating horrific crimes against vulnerable human beings. The courtroom fell silent as Derek Walsh, now officially identified as Derek Michael Castellano, was led in wearing federal prison attire instead of the expensive suits I'd watched him select for 8 years. His appearance had changed dramatically during 6 months of incarceration, with weight loss and stress aging him beyond his 38 years. When his eyes found mine across the gallery, the man who'd once held me at gunpoint now looked broken and defeated. Agent Santos sat beside me, providing support during what prosecutors had warned would be emotionally challenging testimony. My role as the key witness against Derek's trafficking network required detailed public disclosure of our marriage, my discovery of his criminal activities, and my cooperation with international law enforcement agencies. The media attention had been overwhelming, but the opportunity to ensure justice for Derek's victims made every uncomfortable moment worthwhile. The prosecution presented evidence methodically, building a case that demonstrated Derek's central role in trafficking operations spanning multiple continents. Financial records I'd helped gather showed money flows exceeding $25 million, while communication intercepts revealed his coordination of criminal activities affecting over 500 victims during a 4-year period. Victim testimony provided the most powerful evidence against Derek's network. Women who'd survived trafficking spoke about conditions they'd endured, describing systematic exploitation that generated the profits Derek had used to fund our comfortable lifestyle. Their courage in facing their traffickers publicly was remarkable, transforming legal proceedings into moral reckoning about crimes that destroyed lives for commercial gain. Derek's defense attorney attempted to portray him as a minor participant in operations controlled by others, but evidence gathered through international cooperation demonstrated his leadership role in coordinating financial arrangements, transportation logistics, and facility management across multiple countries. His sophisticated false identity documentation proved premeditation and criminal expertise that contradicted claims of limited involvement. When called to testify, I walked to the witness stand knowing that my words would help determine whether Derek received the life sentence prosecutors were seeking. His eyes followed my movement with an expression combining hurt and betrayal, apparently still unable to understand that his criminal activities had made our marriage's destruction inevitable. Under oath, I described discovering Derek's secret passport, the evidence of his parallel existence, and the gradual realization that our 8-year marriage had been built on systematic deception designed to provide operational cover for international criminal activities. My forensic accounting background helped me explain complex financial evidence in terms jurors could understand. The defense attorney's cross-examination focused on my emotional relationship with Derek, suggesting that personal betrayal rather than criminal evidence had motivated my cooperation with law enforcement. His questions were designed to undermine my credibility by portraying me as a vengeful wife, rather than a concerned citizen helping to stop serious crimes. My response emphasized the human cost of Derek's operations, rather than personal hurt from his deception. Over 500 people had suffered because of trafficking networks he'd coordinated, while vulnerable individuals continued to face exploitation by similar criminal organizations operating internationally. Personal feelings were insignificant compared to preventing future victims from experiencing such horrors. The jury deliberated for 18 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all charges related to human trafficking, money laundering, conspiracy, and weapons violations. Derek's expression remained impassive as the judge read each conviction, but his hands shook slightly as he realized the full implications of spending his remaining life in federal prison. During sentencing, victim impact statements provided Derek with direct confrontation about the human consequences of his criminal activities. Women who'd survived his trafficking operations described lasting trauma, destroyed families, and ongoing struggles to rebuild lives after escaping exploitation his network had orchestrated for profit. Derek was offered the opportunity to address the court before sentencing, but declined to speak publicly about his crimes or their impact on victims. His silence demonstrated continued inability or unwillingness to acknowledge the human suffering his operations had caused, maintaining the psychological detachment that had enabled him to treat vulnerable people as commercial commodities. The judge sentenced Derek to life imprisonment without possibility of parole, plus additional consecutive sentences totaling 150 years for related charges. International coordination ensured that similar sentences in other countries would prevent any possibility of Derek ever regaining freedom through legal appeals or diplomatic arrangements. As Derek was led away to begin his life sentence, he looked back at me one final time with an expression I couldn't interpret. The man who'd claimed to love me while coordinating horrific crimes was disappearing forever, leaving me free to rebuild my life with full knowledge of how thoroughly I'd been deceived and manipulated. The aftermath of Derek's conviction required years of therapy to process the psychological impact of learning that my marriage had been built on criminal exploitation of vulnerable human beings. Dr. Sarah Chen, a specialist in trauma recovery, helped me understand that my cooperation with law enforcement represented moral courage rather than marital betrayal. Rebuilding my professional life proved surprisingly manageable, with Morrison & Associates promoting me to partner in recognition of my forensic expertise and ethical conduct during the international investigation. My experience documenting financial crimes had evolved into specialization in human trafficking cases, helping law enforcement agencies track criminal assets and rescue victims worldwide. The foundation I established with Derek's forfeited criminal proceeds focused on supporting trafficking survivors through legal assistance, psychological counseling, and vocational training programs. The Michael Castellano Recovery Fund had helped over 200 survivors rebuild their lives during its first 3 years of operation, transforming money earned through exploitation into resources for healing and empowerment. Nicole Patterson had become my closest confidant during the investigation and trial, eventually joining my foundation as Director of Victim Services. Her background in social work complemented my financial expertise, creating comprehensive support programs that addressed both practical and emotional needs of trafficking survivors. The international law enforcement cooperation that had enabled Derek's arrest led to my consulting work with agencies worldwide, helping develop financial investigation techniques for tracking trafficking networks and recovering criminal assets. My marriage to a criminal mastermind had inadvertently provided insights into operational methods that proved valuable for preventing similar crimes. Agent Santos remained a close friend and professional colleague, often requesting my assistance with complex trafficking cases requiring forensic accounting expertise. Our partnership had evolved from desperate cooperation during Derek's investigation into genuine friendship based on shared commitment to protecting vulnerable populations from criminal exploitation. 3 years after Derek's conviction, I received an unexpected letter from him in federal prison. His message was brief and surprising, expressing what seemed like genuine remorse for the suffering his criminal activities had caused. He claimed that losing our marriage had forced him to confront the human cost of crimes he'd previously viewed only in financial terms. I chose not to respond to Derek's letter, having learned from therapy that maintaining any connection to someone capable of such systematic deception and violence would compromise my psychological recovery. The man I'd married had never really existing only as a carefully constructed persona designed to facilitate criminal operations. Instead, I focused on building authentic relationships with people whose values aligned with my commitment to protecting vulnerable populations. My social circle now included law enforcement professionals, victim advocates, and survivors who'd transformed their experiences into activism against human trafficking. Meeting James Morrison, a federal prosecutor who'd worked on trafficking cases for 15 years, represented my tentative return to romantic relationships after Derek's conviction. James understood the psychological impact of my experiences without requiring detailed explanations, providing emotional support that felt genuine rather than manipulative. Our relationship developed slowly, built on mutual respect, and shared professional commitment to combating international crime. James had never married, having dedicated his career to prosecuting trafficking networks, but he expressed interest in building a life together based on honesty and common values. The contrast between James and Derek was remarkable in every aspect. Where Derek had been secretive about his work, James openly discussed challenging cases and ethical dilemmas inherent in prosecution of international crimes. Where Derek had controlled our finances, James encouraged my financial independence and professional autonomy. Most importantly, James demonstrated consistent behavior across all contexts, never compartmentalizing his personality or maintaining separate identities for different purposes. His integrity was evident in professional settings and personal interactions, providing the psychological security I'd unknowingly lacked during my marriage to Derek. Our engagement announcement generated media attention that reminded me of the ongoing public interest in Derek's case, and its implications for understanding how criminals maintain false identities within legitimate relationships. My story had become a cautionary tale about the importance of trust verification in intimate relationships. The wedding planning process revealed how thoroughly Derek's deception had affected my ability to trust personal judgment about people close to me. James patiently supported my need for extensive background verification and transparency about his personal history, understanding that my hypervigilance represented necessary psychological protection rather than paranoia. Our small ceremony included Agent Santos, Nicole, Dr. Chen, and trafficking survivors who'd become part of my extended chosen family. The guest list represented authentic relationships built on shared values and mutual support, contrasting sharply with Derek's wedding, where most attendees had been either business associates or people maintaining their own deceptions. James and I honeymooned in domestic locations, avoiding international travel that might trigger memories of discovering Derek's passport and the beginning of my nightmare education about human trafficking. Our relationship prioritized emotional intimacy and mutual support over material luxury or exotic experiences. The foundation continued growing, with annual galas raising millions of dollars for survivor support services and trafficking prevention programs. Speaking at these events provided opportunities to share my story while emphasizing that Derek's victims deserved primary attention and support, rather than my personal experiences. During one memorable gala, Maria Santos, a trafficking survivor who'd escaped Derek's network, spoke about rebuilding her life with foundation assistance. Her courage in confronting trauma while pursuing education and advocacy work demonstrated the resilience of human beings who refused to be defined by exploitation they'd endured. Maria's story reminded attendees that trafficking networks like Derek's continued operating worldwide, exploiting vulnerable populations for profit while maintaining legitimate appearances. Our foundation's work represented ongoing commitment to supporting survivors while preventing future victims from experiencing such systematic exploitation. The 5th anniversary of Derek's arrest prompted media retrospectives about his case and its broader implications for understanding international crime networks. Journalists noted that similar operations continued despite increased law enforcement attention, requiring sustained public awareness and political commitment to combat human trafficking effectively. I participated in documentary interviews that explored how criminals maintain double lives within apparently normal relationships, hoping to help other people recognize warning signs of deception that could indicate involvement in serious crimes. My experience had taught me that love and criminal behavior weren't mutually exclusive, requiring careful attention to inconsistencies rather than relying solely on emotional connections. The documentary's broadcast generated hundreds of messages from viewers sharing their own experiences with deceptive partners, confirming that Derek's case represented broader patterns of criminal manipulation within intimate relationships. Many correspondents expressed gratitude for validation that systematic deception by trusted partners represented abuse requiring professional support and legal intervention. Child protection agencies began incorporating my case study into training programs for social workers investigating suspected human trafficking, emphasizing that perpetrators often maintain convincing facades of respectability while coordinating criminal activities. The training helped professionals recognize that traffickers' personal relationships could provide crucial intelligence for rescue operations. International conferences on human trafficking frequently invited me to speak about financial investigation techniques and the importance of survivor support services. These presentations allowed me to honor Derek's victims by transforming their suffering into educational opportunities that might prevent similar crimes. The ongoing global scope of human trafficking operations meant that Derek's arrest represented only one victory in a continuing battle against criminal networks that adapted quickly to law enforcement pressure. New technological tools and international cooperation offered hope for more effective intervention, but required sustained political commitment and public awareness. James and I eventually decided against having children, recognizing that our professional commitment to combating trafficking required travel and emotional availability that might conflict with parenting responsibilities. Instead, we focused on supporting young advocates and survivors pursuing education and activism against human trafficking. 10 years after Derek's conviction, I received news that he'd died in federal prison from complications related to untreated diabetes. His death represented closure to a chapter of my life marked by systematic deception and criminal exploitation, while reminding me of the permanent damage trafficking causes to victims and their families. I chose not to attend Derek's funeral, having long since processed my complex feelings about someone capable of expressing genuine love while orchestrating horrific crimes. His death provided psychological freedom from any remaining connection to the man who'd held me at gunpoint, rather than face consequences for his criminal activities. The foundation established in Derek's victims, Honor continued expanding globally, with offices in 12 countries providing comprehensive support services for trafficking survivors. Our work represented transformation of criminal proceeds into healing resources, ensuring that Derek's legacy contributed to preventing future exploitation rather than enabling continued suffering. Agent Santos retired from active law enforcement but continued consulting on trafficking cases, often working with our foundation to coordinate victim services during rescue operations. Her friendship had evolved from professional necessity into genuine personal connection, based on shared commitment to protecting vulnerable populations. Nicole married a fellow social worker and adopted 2 children who'd been orphaned by trafficking operations, providing loving homes for young people whose families had been destroyed by criminal networks. Her dedication to child protection represented another form of transformation tragedy into hope and healing. Dr. Chen published research about psychological recovery from systematic deception in intimate relationships, using insights from my case to help other therapists support clients who discovered criminal behavior by trusted partners. Her work validated the unique trauma associated with learning that loved ones had been living completely false identities. The university established a scholarship program in my name for students pursuing careers in forensic accounting and victim advocacy, ensuring that future professionals would have resources to develop expertise in combating financial crimes. Education represented long-term hope for more effective intervention against trafficking networks. James was promoted to lead the Justice Department's Human Trafficking Prosecution Unit, coordinating federal cases nationwide, while maintaining our shared commitment to supporting survivor communities. His professional success validated our decision to build a life together dedicated to protecting vulnerable populations from criminal exploitation. My memoir about discovering Derek's criminal activities and cooperating with international law enforcement became a bestseller, with proceeds supporting foundation programs worldwide. The book's success demonstrated public interest in understanding how criminals maintain false identities while providing educational resources about recognizing deception warning signs. Media interviews about the memoir consistently emphasized that Derek's case represented broader patterns requiring systematic responses rather than individual vigilance. Effective anti-trafficking efforts required coordinated international cooperation, adequate funding for victim services, and sustained political commitment to prosecuting complex criminal networks. The Foundation's annual reports documented remarkable success stories of survivors who transformed their experiences into advocacy, education, and support for others facing similar challenges. These testimonials provided hope while demonstrating the resilience of human beings refusing to be defined by exploitation they'd endured. 15 years after Derek's arrest, trafficking prevention programs we'd helped establish were operating in 23 countries, providing education about recruitment tactics and support systems for at-risk populations. Prevention represented the most effective approach to reducing trafficking, requiring community engagement rather than solely law enforcement responses. The international law enforcement coordination that had enabled Derek's arrest became a model for subsequent operations against trafficking networks, with agencies sharing intelligence and resources more effectively than ever before. Our case demonstrated that sophisticated criminal operations could be defeated through sustained cooperation and comprehensive investigation techniques. My current life bears no resemblance to the existence I shared with Derek, built on authentic relationships with people whose values align with protecting, rather than exploiting vulnerable human beings. The comfortable suburban lifestyle Derek provided through criminal proceeds has been replaced by meaningful work that honors his victims while preventing future suffering. The lesson I share most often during speaking engagements is that love doesn't require accepting criminal behavior, regardless of personal cost associated with confronting deception by trusted partners. Derek's genuine affection for me within his compartmentalized existence couldn't excuse systematic exploitation of vulnerable people for profit. Recovery from systematic deception required years of therapy and professional support, but ultimately provided psychological freedom unavailable during my marriage to someone maintaining false identities. Authenticity in relationships became possible only after confronting the reality that Derek's love had coexisted with horrific criminal behavior. The Foundation continues growing, recently opening its 50th facility providing comprehensive services to trafficking survivors worldwide. Each new program represents Derek's criminal proceeds transformed into healing resources, ensuring that his exploitation of vulnerable people ultimately contributed to their empowerment and recovery. James and I recently celebrated our 10th wedding anniversary, marking a decade of marriage built on mutual respect, shared values, and complete honesty about our professional and personal lives. The contrast with Derek's systematic deception demonstrates that authentic, intimate relationships require transparency rather than compartmentalization. Looking back at the woman who discovered Derek's passport in our Santorini hotel room, I recognize someone who possessed the courage to confront devastating truth about someone she loved while cooperating with law enforcement to prevent future victims. That decision to call Interpol rather than confront Derek directly saved my life while ensuring justice for hundreds of trafficking survivors. The networks Derek coordinated have been permanently dismantled, with his associates serving lengthy prison sentences in multiple countries. International cooperation continues disrupting similar operations while survivor support services provide comprehensive assistance to people rebuilding their lives after escaping exploitation. My story demonstrates that systematic deception by trusted partners can be overcome through professional support, legal intervention, and commitment to protecting vulnerable populations from criminal exploitation. The courage to confront uncomfortable truth about people we love ultimately serves justice while providing psychological freedom unavailable through denial or complicity. The documentary about Derek's case recently won international recognition for raising awareness about human trafficking while demonstrating the importance of financial investigation techniques in dismantling criminal networks. Educational impact continues expanding through university curricula and professional training programs worldwide. Nicole often reminds me that discovering Derek's passport represented the beginning rather than end of my real life, freed from unknowing participation in criminal exploitation of vulnerable human beings. The comfortable existence Derek provided through trafficking proceeds couldn't compare to the meaningful relationships and purposeful work that define my current life. Agent Santos frequently observes that my cooperation with international law enforcement demonstrated extraordinary moral courage, transforming personal betrayal into opportunity for justice and prevention of future crimes. Her friendship continues providing perspective about the broader significance of individual decisions to support rather than enable criminal behavior. The Foundation's work represents Derek's ultimate failure, transforming criminal proceeds into resources that empower rather than exploit vulnerable populations. Every survivor we help rebuild their life represents victory over the systematic dehumanization that characterized Derek's approach to trafficking operations. My marriage to James demonstrates that authentic, intimate relationships can develop after experiencing systematic deception, requiring patience and professional support, but ultimately providing emotional security unavailable during compartmentalized criminal relationships. Trust can be rebuilt through consistent honesty and shared commitment to protecting rather than exploiting others. The international law enforcement agencies continue using techniques developed during Derek's investigation to combat trafficking networks worldwide, ensuring that his case contributes to ongoing efforts rather than representing isolated success. Sustained cooperation remains essential for addressing criminal organizations that adapt quickly to law enforcement pressure. Standing in my foundation's newest facility, watching trafficking survivors receive comprehensive support services funded by Derek's forfeited criminal proceeds, I understand that discovering his passport in Santorini represented the beginning of justice rather than personal betrayal. The decision to call Interpol transformed criminal exploitation into healing resources, while demonstrating that individual courage can contribute to protecting vulnerable populations worldwide. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.